Stop. Sorry.
No problem. Good afternoon. David here with Quantum Leap, and my co-host is fighting with a couple feathered friends that he has here in the background, which I actually don't mind. But this first segment, Cory and I are looking forward to laying out how to get prepared for 2022. I know last year we did a symposium on that. This year we're taking a little bit lower profile on that, but we did want to offer some initial thoughts. We will probably go over some of this in January as well, but first I thought we could do our quick check-in. If you have anything, Cory and I talked briefly yesterday, and he told me about some exciting new coaching training that you're looking at doing. You don't have to say if you don't want to, but I just appreciate how we're always kind of learning new things, and we do this show so we can talk about this stuff, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's Gail and I are always looking for ways to improve our skills. And this year, business has been pretty good, so we're just kind of looking at, okay, what can we invest in to be even better? And I think this is an opportunity to do a fully ICF certified course for me. Gail's going to do something on diversity, equity, and inclusion. She's been working with a company that does that, and it's a pretty big coaching program they have. Whereas I will probably look at something like Coactive Institute, which is one of the earliest ICF certified courses. And their approach is a little different. I think it's similar to what I do, but I feel like it'll give me a more holistic approach as opposed to some of the technical stuff that I do. So I get kind of all of that. It's things I already do, but maybe more directed. And what I really like about their program is it's very, it really does require a level of participation that most programs don't. Like, we'll give you a certificate and you can go off and coach, but this one is like, well, to get the certificate in the first place, you actually have to perform, right? Not just practice with other coaches, but actually have clients who will, pay for hours and do all that kind of thing. So it does require some, proof to get the certification, at least. To complete the program, anybody can do that. So yeah, it's exciting. It's going to be a big investment of time next year.
Yeah, no, I look forward to hearing more about it. And we always compare notes on the coaching. I love just seeing what other people are doing out there. And, as I said, I've been working my way through that Maxwell training with Valerie Burton, who I think is just an amazing personality. She's a coach, but she's like this magnetic kind of presenter too. So, and it's very simple too, that the good people, they make it seem simple. I'm at a little bit different place in the coaching than you are, in terms of you're drilling down on some more specifics, but each coach has like a unique take. So it's just interesting to see what works for them. I'd love to have her come on our show maybe next year. So we'll see about that. And, I have been, I guess I always have this pretty diverse ongoing business development program, but I'll leave it there for now. I continue to work my way through that Tony Robbins book about, the NLP techniques, because it's really about how do you encourage people to change their behavior? How do you open up that possibility that things can be better? And I know I got a lot of that from you and my business coach. So much of it's the example of showing it, but how do you kind of, people, one, the biggest thing, they have to be ready to change, but if they are ready, how do you get them to change? I know Tony uses the example of a guy who wants to quit eating as much chocolate, and we say we want to do these things, but there's a benefit to us staying exactly how he is. So he has this guy eat nothing but chocolate for the 3 days of the seminar, and by the third day he almost is so mad at him that he quits. And who knows if he quit eating chocolate or not, but there's some pretty unique tactics out there that I think if we study them, they're interesting. But I did want to get to our program today, and we'll continue to check in on our own ongoing things. I love to hear how your training is going. I know you're also did a live a speakers training as well before, and you've done a number of great coaching programs. So maybe we can talk about some of those as we get into some of those issues. Maybe we do a special session on how to market yourself as a public speaker, so to speak. So but this one is on how to position your business for 2022. So I was just going to ask you, we are in a time, I think, of increased awareness and great opportunity for business owners to rebrand themselves and to really pursue the business that they want, that'll give them the life that they want. But how would you say somebody gets started? Maybe they're at a company right now and they want to start a side business, or maybe they're kind of been kicking around a side business for a while and they say, well, 2022, I want to make that the year for my success. How do you get started?
Well, I always suggest, and not everyone has a vision, but having a vision for the business is the big thing, and for your life and for everything that goes with it. So it's always if you haven't done it already or don't do it regularly, or just sometimes sporadically, it's a good time to review. What is the vision? What is it that I need to put in there, and making it bigger, right? Just it's like, okay, this is where I would really, really dream of being in 2022. It's possible, and it's positive, and it may be quite a stretch. But from there, we can then create our goals, right? What is it going to be? What is going to be our financial goals, our client goals, our personal goals, all those things that we do that come out of that vision for the future. And having a vision first really helps us connect to those goals, makes those goals poignant rather than sort of, oh, it's just something I ought to do, versus like, okay, this is going to get me closer to that vision. And a vision is usually more like 3 to 5 years out. It wouldn't be for what is it going to look like in 2022, but what would 2022 have to be to make that happen? So then it's goal setting and starting to create an action plan to complete those goals. And those would be the big things. I mean, I think it's always worth taking a day or two out of working in the business to work on the business to do those things. I'm pretty fortunate that Gail and I are able to have these conversations all the time because we work together, closely on this. And of course, we also need to set our goals and create our action plans and set our vision. But I find that, people are especially kind of alone in their business. They don't have as much of an opportunity to do that. And so that plan is an opportunity to put that together in their own mind, and then maybe find a community to share it with.
Great. Yeah, I do see that about you. And that, I mean, this is the stronger together type of attitude where really we're exponentially better when you collaborate with somebody than, the sum of your parts, so to speak. I see that with you and Gail. And also I see that with our podcast as well, how we really draw out the best in one another about, this certain energy that comes from that mastermind. And I did want to add for folks that you have this great process for helping people come up with this vision and those goals that, that's something that almost everybody knows, or maybe they don't know that that's the first place that you start. And even if they do, you need somebody to help facilitate that. And I think that's something that you did for me early on, which was hugely helpful. And you also call it a 360 vision, because it's more than just your business or your life vision. It's really a complete vision for your whole, place on this planet, so to speak. The combination. I don't know if you have a thoughts on the 360 vision versus the regular vision.
Well, I remember we worked with one coach who, we learned a lot and we did a huge amount. It was quite an investment, but the vision was really just a statement, like, this is where we're going to be in 18 months. And it always just felt like really small. It's like a one-liner. And for us, it was almost more just like a slightly bigger mission statement. And we always look at it as a vision. It should be inspiring. Why it's not so much why I'm doing this, but what it is that we're going to accomplish, both in the business. What is it going to look like? What is life going to look like? What our vacations look like? And all the things that go around it. So like you spend a lot of time with Rotary and other organizations. It might be, how are you involved in Rotary? Are you traveling, or are you doing more community functions, and are you engaging, your clients and those kind of things? And so as you put that all in the vision, it becomes more real, and you become more as a part of it. So our process is really to start with something that's a framework for 360 your entire life, and then fill all those points in.
Right. And, I really always come back to core values now. I think in this day and age, that's something that's timeless. And really, with a lot of what's going on out there in the world, in politics and elsewhere, the more we can be connected to strong core values about who we are, that'll really set us apart from, I know in politics, we used to, there was a few case studies where you would pass a green bill, AB 32, which was this landmark greenhouse gas emissions bill. And then all these companies, the polluters, would come on after it was already going to pass. And then they'd say they were supporters, a way to green up your image. So they would say they're green, even though they opposed it. And I think, and from a standpoint of core values, you don't want to have to fake it. You actually, if you're going to be green, be green. But, if you're going to be something in business, and that's something I really admire about small businesses, is our ability to actually be how we want to be and not kind of try to be something that we're not. And I just see a lot of what's wrong in politics out there and that's going on out there in the universe, or, people are kind of being something that they're not, or they're trying to be something that they're not. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think it's the advantage of being a small business. You can be, what you want to be. And, some people go into it just as a job, and they're self-employed, they're their own boss, but that's fine. But I find if we want to, especially for those who have, I think who feel like there's connected to a greater purpose, or if, especially in some of the work that we do, it's sometimes easier to get a job. I mean, the job market's pretty strong right now, and people with professional skills can earn a lot, but we don't really find it suitable, right? Because we don't necessarily align with the business or with the people we work for. And so we, go into business for ourselves, and that can be a struggle. It can be, kind of a long, a long, steady climb to greater heights. And sometimes it feels like you're just actually kind of going backwards. So having that connection to purpose and vision and everything else and core values, makes up for a lot of the income that we might be losing by being self-employed.
Yeah, which is a great segue into my next question for you. And, I feel like sometimes we feel like we get caught in that eddy where we're actually going backwards. But I think what can break us out of that is, in Think and Grow Rich, they call it a definite plan. Today we call it a business plan, but I think there's a real benefit to writing down something, a plan for your business. Could you just tell us about kind of what that is and why that's important to look at, maybe to get ready for 2022?
Yeah, there's different ways to approach planning. If your goal is to get loans and everything else, there's definitely styles of planning that help, banks kind of make decisions for you. But then there's also the business plan for yourself, the one that inspires, and that's that vision, that's the goals, it's the plan for those goals, and it's the action steps that are going to be taken to accomplish that, and the milestones along the way that those action steps lead to. So that having that in place, to whatever degree you can get it, means things are much more likely to get done, right? And especially many small business owners tend to run for shiny objects, and a plan kind of helps us stay on track and on that path towards completing things. Because if we don't have that plan in place and a strong idea of what we're going to do, it's easy to get distracted and taken off track by obstacles or new ideas or, shiny objects. And I recommend, taking those new ideas and putting them in a parking lot. And Gail knows I am full of great ideas and some really bad ones. So we kind of just park them away, and sometimes we'll implement them if it works into the action plan. And if it doesn't, we really have to consider what it's going to take us far off of that. There's in a lot of the mindset work that I do, I'm finding that almost all solo business owners are very option oriented. We like to have lots of options available to us. And that tends to also mean that we don't get a lot of things done consistently, which hurts cash flow.
Yeah, I know that brings us to number three. I'm going to turn it over to you for the kind of switch interviews, so to speak.
Yeah. So the next thing though, and I think part of, any business plan, of course, especially we're starting to look at the year, is of course the marketing plan, and that's bringing in the leads, that's bringing in the prospects, so that your sales can be successful. So what would you say is changing in 2022 for marketing?
I think it really starts with the business plan, as you say, and I know we've talked about on this show before where I see a couple different takes here. I think really the most common approach to marketing as a small business owner is to get to the point where you don't have to do any marketing. It's all just comes to you from word of mouth and kind of people knowing you. I still actually wouldn't recommend that entirely, because in order to move forward and reach out beyond the people that are going to come to you, I think you want an ongoing marketing campaign. But this is something that is part of my industry leader program. And I really think that sets industry leaders apart. They're not only the best at what they do, but everybody knows they're the best at what they do. And that's the thing. I think without the marketing plan, you might be the best at what you do. And we see a lot of those people in our BNI, but not everybody's going to know it. And they're not going to know how you're unique. So, it doesn't have to be video. We started, I think, with this podcast in a large part. That was really what I used to call the centerpiece of our outreach campaign, really giving people a chance to know you in a way that you're providing value. And then that kind of, so when you start going to one of those sales conversations, they already kind of know you. They still got to know what you do and what you're looking for. But there's really just a number of things that go into this, and it's a larger conversation, kind of how the process that you have for putting together a business plan. I have that for a marketing plan, and it's really kind of a coaching conversation. So I think, I don't know if you have any um, thoughts on that too, in terms of this marketing versus just being who you are and having business come to you. If there's any reason why you shouldn't just do that, even though that way you don't actually have to put any time into marketing. But then how do you take your business forward, so to speak?
Yeah, I have no idea. Marketing. There are some businesses where maybe it doesn't require. I don't know. I used to do, I would say, some direct prospecting when I did software development, and that was really effective for me. But I think it was also largely because what I did was very specialized, and it was very easy. When somebody said we have a need for this, I could just reach out and say I do that, and 50% of the time they're like, let's talk, and 25% of the time you're hired. So that was easy. But when we have competition, especially serious competition, we've got to stand out and somehow, and that does require marketing, and that starts with having that core message, the core values, and then differentiating yourself. And that might be, I know, what you do in terms of the programs you're doing online helps people actually stand out, right? Because they can talk about what makes them different, and also experts in their field, right? Because it's not always just about being different, it's also about who you help the best. And so I think that that's going to be a big part of 2022 is standing out from the rest of the field, especially as more and more people are entering, becoming business owners. It's millions last year, and they're all heading out there to compete with us.
Yeah, I think the big thing too, and this goes with the next question on, ongoing campaign, is it's really about what's going to work for that person to really tailor it, because different people have different strengths. And sometimes maybe it's a small marketing campaign. Maybe they're just doing one podcast a month and a social media post a week. Whereas other people, you might want to do a video a week and whatever, a blog. So it's kind of coming up with what works for them. And, I really admire what you and Gail do. You have this impressive ongoing social media campaign where you use kind of podcasts, blogs, you have your lives, you have this collaboration with me. You have a series of events too that you put on. So
And referral marketing. We also are BNI.
Yeah, yeah, and you have referral marketing. I do think referral marketing is probably the best thing for small business. That was kind of a life-changing thing for me, and we've talked about that before, but that definitely is a place to start.
Yeah, I had a conversation the other day with somebody he was talking about, their experience and how they weren't really getting any referrals, and it was, it's a time for me to leave, and I know they've, worked pretty hard, and their numbers are pretty good, and it, the question is always, what are you going to do instead? And how can you use your networking, your, hard referral group to maybe support you in all the other things we do? And that's something I think Gail and I do really well, and you do well, David, is, maybe you're not getting those direct referrals, and you've got guests for your podcasts, all over the place that you can meet through, these networking channels, and they're good people, and then those people can promote you, and so you find collaborative partners. And I think that that's one of the great benefits of having a strong networking group for your marketing, is how much people can support you in it.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And you almost I've gotten this podcast to the point where you don't have to do as much other marketing, because they already see you on the podcast. If you know that they're watching your podcast sometimes, or even just occasionally, then when you talk to them, you don't have to meet with them as often. You don't have to, the interactions is different. And I was curious about what you saw that this podcast has done for you, and what some of your other podcasts has done for you from a business perspective, if you have thoughts on that.
Well, I do know that I'd like to be doing some more podcasting in terms of some of the stuff I do. And Gail and I have our Bourbon and Business live broadcast, which she's been putting into audio podcasts. She's kind of in charge of that, but I know they're becoming more available, and we're using that, and it helps us focus on what we're doing, and clarify our message. Especially because I find that getting what we know out of our own heads and into the minds of other people, our prospects, there's a deep disconnect in messaging. And you just had, Geo Marcus on last week, and even she was talking about that. It's like a copywriter can only do so much, right? They still have to get it all out of you. And so the more you do this kind of things, the more you talk, the more I think the more we clarify what it is we're doing. And it's a growth process. Podcasting is also a growth process. We don't come out of it just like, being perfect podcasters and having the perfect message. And so each time it just feels stronger and better. And I think that's been the big benefit for me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of benefits that are maybe almost intangible, in that they benefit us as people, but it's more of kind of a higher order benefit. For example, the public speaking, or how to present ideas, that the podcast for me has been just kind of life changing in some ways. And just this synergy that we create around some of these ideas, and the ability to express it, I think is a very unique thing. So I've been so happy and grateful to work with you on our podcast, and kind of where we've come to, and where we can go with it as well. But this question of power partners, again, this is another key concept of BNI. If you don't mind just telling us what power partners are and how they might be able to help.
Well, from our concept, power partners are people who are inspired to help you, right? We're inspired to help each other. And I don't know, partners is a strong word as far as I'm concerned. And, as part of my training, and, the coaching on relationships is, we have power teams, or which might be more of, okay, hey, I'm inspired to help you, you're inspired to help me. And then I think the partnership grows by, that frequent contact, and keeping that relationship going, which is probably one of the most, I think, is the most difficult things in business. Is relationships. Keeping those kind of alive is one thing, but having those ones where the benefit is more to the business and maybe to the friendship and the social part, but having a bit of both is also really important to keep that alive. So I think that that's the concept of the power partners is on balance is better for business than it is for social. And at the same time, there's some strong synergy personally there too.
Yeah, I think it's, Power Partners has been another one of these concepts that have really revolutionized my business. And, I really see how, um, you know, you can look at it, maybe you have equal power partners where you're kind of in the same position, but I also have power partners who the power partners are even way more influential than me, and they know a lot more about certain things. So it's just amazing what you can come up with there and the kind of results that you produce with power partners, that you really never know where you're going to go in terms of what they can do for you. And over time, especially as you get to know each other better and have a element of trust, and then your businesses and the things that you're into grow and change, there becomes this just huge synergy. So again, BNI is the place to start to find those power partners, because if you go to everybody in BNI, is at least most people are familiar with that concept, that you learn how to use power partners in BNI, and then you can develop power partners outside of BNI, so to speak. And it's really a great way to do business. Um,
And
we are just
I would just throw out that the one real benefit of doing that too is, even if something doesn't become that partnership, maybe you meet 100 people and two of them, kind of develop into that kind of partnership. But working on those will mean that maybe 10 to 15 others will actually be strong kind of supporters in your favor. And that's really how I built my business in software. Was I didn't really have it. I had one or two power partners along the way, as you could say, but mostly it was just the strength of building those relationships helped me immensely.
Yeah,
Still does.
yeah, no, well put. And we are just about at time, so I think I'm going to cut out on that last question.
Okay.
But so we can get to Don, we're actually going to talk to him about a few of these issues as well. So Dave and Cory signing off for our first leg of Quantum Leap, and we'll see you on the second segment. Thank you.